Let me tell you something that can change the way you experience relationships, your self-worth, and your power in the world. Too often we give our energy to people who are not ready to receive it. Not because they don't care, but because they are afraid. Afraid of closeness, afraid of vulnerability, afraid of the very love that could transform them. And here's the truth. The moment you stop responding, the moment you step into your own power, something extraordinary happens. They feel it, they notice it, they regret it, because you are no longer available, no longer bending, no longer compromising your essence. They realize what they've lost, but here's the secret. They only regret it if they truly see the value in what you bring. This is not about punishment. It's about awakening. Your absence is not cruelty. It's a mirror reflecting their own choices back to them. And when they see that mirror, when they feel the weight of what's slipping through their fingers, means they confront a truth they've been avoiding, that love, connection, and respect cannot be demanded. They must be earned and honored. When you reclaim your energy, when you embrace your own worth, you ignite a force that is irresistible. The universe responds to people who are self-driven, self-respecting, self-loving. And you become magnetic, not because you are chasing, but because you are whole. And that wholeness, let me tell you, cannot be ignored. Boundaries are not walls, they are beacons. They show people who you are and what you deserve. And when someone who once took you for granted sees you standing tall, fully alive, fully engaged in your own destiny, they will feel a pang of regret. But more importantly, they will feel the power of your presence that they can no longer access. So don't chase, don't bend, don't shrink. Step into your greatness. Own your voice, honor your time. Celebrate your worth. Because when you do, what happens is simple yet profound. The right people are drawn in, and those who are blind to your value, they feel the weight of their absence in your life, and they regret losing you. But that's not your burden. That's the awakening. That's the divine principle at work. You are not a convenience. You are a force, a presence, a spark. And when you stop responding, when you fully embrace your own life, you don't just teach them a lesson. You transform yourself, and that is unstoppable. That is magnetic. That is you living on purpose. When someone steps away, when they stop responding, it is easy for others to misinterpret the silence as disinterest or abandonment. But in reality, absence is one of the most powerful tools for creating awareness, both for the person who has stepped back and for the one who is left to reckon with the space created. Most people live their lives on autopilot, moving from interaction to interaction without truly noticing the depth of connection or the weight of presence in their lives. When you are constantly available, always responding, always accessible, it is human nature for your energy and contributions to be taken for granted. This is not a flaw in character, it is a flaw in awareness. We do not value fully what is endlessly present. We notice only what is scarce. When you remove yourself from constant interaction, when you create a space where your presence is no longer assumed, you force the other person to confront a reality they may have been ignoring. Suddenly, the casual rhythm of life, the effortless ease with which they could rely on your attention, is disrupted. They are confronted with the silence, and it acts as a mirror. In that mirror, they see the void that your absence has created. The small gestures, the conversations that once felt routine, the support that was always there. They begin to realize these things were not trivial. They begin to understand that your presence carried value, depth, and meaning. This process is not just about making someone miss you, it is about creating awareness of what your presence contributed to the shared experience. When you stop responding, you are not playing a game or seeking control, you are providing clarity. Human beings have a way of underestimating the people who make their lives easier, brighter, or more emotionally safe. We tend to normalize love, attention, and care until it is no longer there. Absence disrupts that normalization. It highlights the extraordinary in what was previously ordinary. For the person stepping back, absence is equally transformative. It is a moment of empowerment, a declaration that your emotional energy is not a commodity to be depleted by someone else's avoidance. By withdrawing, you begin to reclaim agency over your own attention, your own responses, and your own emotional investment. You realize that your value does not depend on constant validation from others. This is where the principle becomes profoundly liberating. Awareness is created not through confrontation, not through argument, but through intentional space. Space allows clarity, reflection, and insight to emerge naturally, without force. Psychologically, Absence triggers a combination of reflection, longing, and evaluation in the avoidant. People who habitually avoid emotional intimacy do so because vulnerability feels threatening. But absence strips away the safety net of constant interaction, and suddenly they are faced with consequences they cannot ignore. They must reckon with the fact that the connection they once took for granted is no longer accessible at the flip of a hand. In that space, awareness arises, not because of punishment, but because the rhythm of interaction has been broken. It is. In the quiet moments, the missed messages, the unanswered calls, that insight begins to take root. The wisdom in absence is subtle but profound. It teaches that presence is sacred, that emotional energy is finite, and that human connection is a privilege, not an entitlement. It is an opportunity for both parties to awaken, to recognize patterns, to understand unspoken dynamics, and to appreciate the richness of what was there all along. When absence is exercised intentionally, it becomes a catalyst for reflection, a divine principle in action. The universe often responds to space, to silence, and to self-respect with a clarity that words cannot convey. There is a universal truth in human relationships. We often fail to recognize the value of what we have until it is gone. This is not a reflection of malice or lack of care. It is a reflection of human nature. When someone is constantly present, when their attention, love, or support is always available, it can be easy to take it for granted. The mind normalizes what is always there, and the heart becomes complacent in the face of continual access. It is only when that presence is removed, when the connection, the conversation, the warmth, the support is no longer available, that the magnitude of what we had becomes clear. Loss has a unique way of cutting through ignorance, distraction, and avoidance, forcing recognition where before there was neglect. In the context of avoidant personalities, this dynamic is particularly pronounced. Avoidants have a natural tendency to pull away from emotional intimacy, to retreat when feelings become too intense, to create distance as a form of self-protection. For them, closeness can feel threatening, suffocating, or overwhelming. Because of this, they often fail to fully appreciate the depth, consistency, and care of someone who is present, patient, and emotionally available. They may take for granted the texts that come without fail, the listening ear, the understanding heart, the willingness to show up. It is only when this consistent presence disappears that the reality of what they have lost begins to sink in. Loss operates as a mirror, reflecting not only absence but also opportunity missed. When the avoidant realizes that the other person has stopped responding, they are forced to confront questions that were previously avoided. What did I have? How did I take it for granted? Could I have done more? In that silence, clarity emerges. Regret is not simply an emotional reaction. It is a recognition of value that was previously invisible. The presence that once seemed ordinary now feels extraordinary because it is no longer accessible. This principle is not limited to romantic relationships. It applies in friendships, family dynamics, and professional connections. When we cease to give our energy freely, the universe responds by revealing who truly valued it. There is also a deeper, almost divine principle at work. Human beings learn through consequence. We often fail to appreciate a gift until it is removed. By stepping back and creating the space of absence, we are not manipulating or punishing. We are allowing natural law to unfold. The person on the receiving end experiences the weight of what they lost, and in that weight lies profound insight. They begin to understand that the energy, presence, and emotional investment they once dismissed were not limitless. They were precious, rare, and deserving of respect. For the one who steps away, this principle carries empowerment. Recognizing that value is often appreciated only in absence encourages a new perspective on relationships. Your energy is sacred, your time is precious, and your presence is a gift, not a guarantee. When you stop responding to avoidant behavior, you are not seeking revenge. You are honoring yourself and teaching an unspoken truth. The world notices what is absent far more than what is always present. It is a lesson in self-respect, in boundary setting, and in the art of allowing natural consequence to teach awareness. Moreover, this dynamic transforms not just the avoidant, but the one who steps back. By embracing the principle that value is recognized through loss, you shift your mindset from desperation to empowerment, from neediness to magnetism. You begin to see relationships not as transactions where you chase attention, but as energetic exchanges where presence is earned, appreciated, and respected. The moment you embody this understanding, your life changes. You become a person whose energy is consciously given, whose love is deliberate, whose presence is intentional, and, paradoxically, that is when others begin to truly see, understand, and regret what they allowed to slip away. Emotional autonomy is one of the most powerful forces in human relationships, yet it is often misunderstood. Many people confuse love or connection with dependence, believing that constant availability, constant reassurance, or constant compromise is the path to being valued. But true power lies not in clinging, not in chasing, not in being endlessly present for someone else. It lies in being whole, self-directed, and complete within yourself. When you cultivate emotional autonomy, when you learn to generate your own joy, fulfillment, and stability, something extraordinary happens. Desire awakens in ways that mere attention can never achieve. When you stop responding to an avoidant, you are not shutting them out to punish them. You are demonstrating that your happiness is not contingent upon their actions. You are showing that your emotional world is yours to govern. This is deeply magnetic. Human beings are naturally drawn to strength, independence, and self-possession. When someone can operate from their own center, they create a gravitational pull that is impossible to ignore. Desire is not merely physical attraction. It is the recognition of someone who moves through life with purpose, confidence, and self-respect. Emotional autonomy communicates all of these qualities silently yet powerfully. Avoidants, in particular, are wired to fear emotional entanglement. They are often hesitant to lean into intimacy because it feels threatening, overwhelming, or binding. But when they encounter someone who is emotionally autonomous, the dynamic shifts. Instead of feeling suffocated or pressured, they feel a subtle, undeniable tension. They want what they cannot control, what they cannot take for granted. Your absence, your centeredness, your self-possession spark awareness. They notice not only what they are missing, but also what they are drawn to on a deeper, almost instinctual level. The principle of desire sparked by autonomy is simple yet profound. People crave what is authentic, rare, and independent. When you give away your emotional energy indiscriminately, when you are always available, desire diminishes because scarcity is removed. But when you step into emotional autonomy, you create a natural tension that commands attention. You are no longer defined by their reactions. Your value is no longer negotiable. And this is the paradox. The moment you stop being dependent on their recognition, their desire for you often grows stronger. It is not about manipulation. It is about alignment with natural law. The universe responds to presence, not to need. Emotional autonomy also empowers you to operate from clarity rather than fear. When you are emotionally self-sufficient, you are free to make choices based on your highest good rather than the anxiety of keeping someone else engaged. You can step back without guilt, without overthinking, without compromise of your core values. This freedom is palpable. People sense it. Avoidants, who are often skilled at maintaining distance, suddenly feel the magnetic pull of someone who is fully alive, fully present for themselves, and fully committed to their own growth. They feel the absence not as abandonment, but as the undeniable evidence of value and independence. At its core, emotional autonomy is a declaration: I am responsible for my happiness. I am whole, complete, and deserving of respect. I will not diminish myself to fit someone else's comfort or avoidance. When you embody this truth, you shift the dynamics of connection entirely. Desire is no longer a transaction. It becomes an acknowledgement of your worth, your presence, and your power. And the beautiful irony is that you do not have to chase, convince, or perform. Your groundedness and self-possession do the work naturally. You become magnetic, not through effort, but through alignment with the principle that your energy is sacred and your presence intentional. The journey of emotional autonomy is transformative, not only for the avoidant, but for you. It teaches you that relationships thrive not on neediness, but on wholeness. It shows you that desire is not cultivated through pleading, but through power and integrity. And ultimately, it reveals a truth that is both simple and profound. When you stop being available at the expense of your own wholeness, you spark a desire that is genuine, deep, and lasting, because it arises not from fear, but from respect, recognition, and admiration for the life you have chosen to fully inhabit. Scarcity is one of the most revealing forces in human interaction. When something is abundant, it is easy to take for granted. When something is always accessible, it is easy to assume that it will never be lost. But when scarcity enters, when your presence, our attention or your energy is no longer guaranteed, it exposes the truth of priorities, intentions, and values. In relationships, scarcity acts as a mirror, reflecting back to us what people truly care about, what they truly prioritize, and where their loyalties lie. It is a principle both simple and profound. What is scarce commands awareness, attention, and respect. When you stop responding, when you step back, when you create the natural scarcity of your attention, the other person is forced to confront a reality they may have been avoiding. Avoidants, in particular, have a tendency to drift away emotionally, to prioritize comfort over connection, to unconsciously take for granted the consistency of someone who is fully present for them. They may appear nonchalant, even indifferent, when in fact their actions are a reflection of misaligned priorities. The moment your responses, your energy, your availability becomes scarce, the illusion of security disappears. Suddenly, they must reckon with the fact that what they assumed was always there, the support, the emotional availability, the connection, is now a privilege, not a guarantee. Scarcity operates as a truth detector. It cuts through excuses, rationalizations, and avoidance behaviors. People often say they value someone, but scarcity shows what they are willing to act on and invest in. When your energy is no longer effortlessly available, you reveal the gap between words and actions. Avoidants, who are often experts at maintaining emotional distance, begin to feel the weight of your absence because it cannot be ignored. Scarcity forces reflection, evaluation, and sometimes regret. It illuminates priorities by asking the unspoken question, am I willing to make space for this person in my life, or have I been taking them for granted? This principle is not about manipulation, it is about alignment. By creating natural scarcity through emotional autonomy and boundary setting, you are not forcing someone to change, you are giving them the opportunity to reveal their true priorities. You are clarifying for yourself who is willing to meet you in authenticity, consistency, and respect. Scarcity acts like a spotlight, shining on the intentions of others, allowing you to see clearly who is aligned with your values and who is not. It is one of the most honest and transformative tools available in human relationships. For the person who steps back, this principle is deeply empowering. Scarcity teaches you to honor your own energy as precious, finite, and non-negotiable. It reminds you that your presence is a gift, not a guarantee, and that your attention is a form of currency that should be spent wisely. When you stop being endlessly available, you stop enabling avoidance, complacency, and disregard. You create a natural filter. Those who truly value you, who recognize your worth, will rise to meet you. Those who do not, scarcity reveals the truth, and that truth saves you from wasted emotional energy and unfulfilled expectations. There is also a profound spiritual dimension to scarcity. It is a principle aligned with natural law. Energy follows intention, presence follows purpose, and recognition follows worth. When your energy becomes scarce, it no longer flows unconsciously to those who fail to prioritize it. Instead, it flows intentionally, first to yourself and then to relationships that are reciprocal, authentic, and aligned with your values. In this way, scarcity is not a tool for control, but a principle for clarity, empowerment, and conscious living. Ultimately, scarcity reveals priorities because it forces honesty, reflection, and alignment. It is a mirror that shows who is truly willing to invest in you, who is willing to step into connection, and who is only present when your energy was freely available. When applied with integrity, scarcity is not about punishment. It is about illumination. It teaches respect, demands accountability, and clarifies the landscape of human relationships. It shows both parties what is sacred, what is valuable, and what is worthy of commitment. And in that revelation lies a transformative truth. When you honor your own worth and allow scarcity to work its quiet power, the universe responds with clarity, integrity, and alignment, drawing to you only what truly belongs in your life. Avoidants operate from a place of self-protection. Emotional intimacy, connection, and vulnerability often feel threatening to them, not because they lack capacity for love, but because they fear the consequences of being truly seen. To step into closeness is to step into potential discomfort, to expose themselves to needs, expectations, and emotions they may feel unequipped to handle. This fear drives their distancing behaviors, pulling away, shutting down, or deflecting, creating space where emotional engagement feels safer. Yet, paradoxically, this very avoidance is what amplifies their awareness once absence is introduced. When you stop responding, when you reclaim your energy and create boundaries, the avoidant is confronted with a reality they cannot easily escape, the emotional consequence of their behavior. They begin to feel what it means to be on the receiving end of absence, not just as a concept, but as a tangible, undeniable truth. The comfort of taking your presence for granted is removed, replaced by reflection, longing, and sometimes regret. They are forced to acknowledge what they have avoided, the emotional richness, the connection, the consistent care that is now unavailable to them. It is in this confrontation with consequence that transformation begins to germinate. Avoidants fear consequences not because they are incapable of love, but because love requires surrender, responsibility, and risk. When you step back, you do not manipulate them, you simply allow the natural effect of absence to unfold. The silence, the space, the unavailability becomes a mirror reflecting their choices back to them. They see that avoidance comes at a cost, that by retreating, they risk losing something of value, something real, something meaningful. This is why absence can be so powerful. It forces accountability, not through confrontation, but through experience. At the same time, fear of emotional consequences is deeply tied to identity. Avoidants often construct self-images around independence, self-sufficiency, and emotional control. To admit longing, to acknowledge desire, or to confront regret challenges that identity. When your presence is no longer guaranteed, they face a subtle but profound internal reckoning, the realization that connection is not a burden but a gift, that intimacy, while risky, is also enriching and necessary, and that avoidance carries its own consequences. This internal tension can provoke fear, discomfort, and sometimes a surge of longing, emotions that they are not accustomed to managing because they have built walls to avoid them. For you, stepping into this dynamic with intention is a declaration of self-worth. You are not responsible for forcing someone to confront their emotional immaturity, nor are you required to stay available in order to teach a lesson. Your power comes from honoring your own boundaries, your own presence, and your own emotional energy. By doing so, you allow natural consequences to operate. The avoidant experiences the impact of their avoidance, and in that experience, they often begin to recognize the value of what they lost, the significance of what they ignore, and the reality of what cannot be reclaimed without effort, vulnerability, and authenticity. There is also a profound, almost spiritual principle at work here. Life responds to clarity, integrity, and aligned energy. When you step back and let the natural consequences of absence unfold, you are not punishing the avoidant. You are allowing universal principles of cause and effect to illuminate truth. Fear of emotional consequences is a catalyst for growth, but only when the space is created to reflect, feel, and understand. Your absence is not cruelty. It is an invitation for awareness, accountability, and transformation. Ultimately, avoidants fear emotional consequences because avoidance always comes at a price. When you stop responding, when you reclaim your power, you do more than protect yourself. You create a mirror, a space, and a reality in which they can see what their choices cost them. And in that space, clarity emerges. The lessons are felt, not preached. The awareness is internalized, not imposed. And the transformation, though it may not be immediate, begins with the simple principle that actions, avoidance, and disengagement always carry consequences. Emotional, relational, and personal. Boundaries are often misunderstood. Many people think of them as walls, barriers, or rejections. But in reality, boundaries are a declaration of value, self-respect, and purpose. They are the invisible lines that communicate without words what is acceptable and what is not, what is honored and what is not, and what is essential for your emotional and spiritual well-being. When you establish boundaries, you are not distancing yourself out of fear or selfishness. You are defining your presence as sacred, your energy as precious, and your life as intentional. In relationships with avoidance, boundaries are transformative because they create clarity, foster respect, and amplify your intrinsic worth. Avoidants often struggle with emotional closeness and they may unconsciously push against or test boundaries because vulnerability is uncomfortable for them. When boundaries are weak or non-existent, they unconsciously take advantage of that availability, diminishing your presence and sometimes eroding your self-esteem. By contrast, when boundaries are clear and firm, they establish a new dynamic, one of accountability and recognition. The avoidant begins to understand that your attention is not limitless, your care is not unconditional in the absence of respect, and your presence is a privilege, not a guarantee. Boundaries, therefore, are not only protective, they are magnetic. They demand respect because they demonstrate that you honor yourself first, and this command of self-respect naturally shifts the energy of the relationship. The power of boundaries lies in their clarity. When you communicate and enforce your limits consistently, you remove confusion, uncertainty, and manipulation from the dynamic. Avoidants, who often thrive in ambiguity to protect themselves from emotional risk, are confronted with a clear truth. If they wish to engage meaningfully, they must honor your presence, energy, and emotional contributions. Boundaries illuminate the relationship in ways words alone cannot. They create a structure in which respect is the default expectation, not the exception, and they allow both parties to navigate the connection from a space of honesty, integrity, and alignment. Moreover, boundaries are deeply empowering. They allow you to operate from choice rather than reaction, from intention rather than desperation. When you set limits on your time, attention, and emotional labor, you reclaim your power and create a natural hierarchy of value. Your life and energy come first, and the relationship becomes a reflection of mutual respect. Rather than dependency. Avoidants often react to this shift with heightened awareness because it challenges their comfort zone. They feel the absence of unchecked access, and in that feeling, they begin to notice the depth, consistency, and importance of what you contribute. Your boundaries do not push them away. They illuminate your worth and invite engagement on equal, respectful terms. Boundaries also foster emotional health. They prevent resentment, burnout, and manipulation, which often occur when one person gives endlessly while the other withdraws or avoids responsibility. By honoring your own limits, you model integrity, self-respect, and emotional intelligence. This modeling is powerful because it communicates without argument. Your presence and energy are not commodities. They are sacred expressions of your life and values. Avoidants, who often resist emotional responsibility, are confronted with a living example of consistency, self-worth, and intentionality, which naturally commands recognition and respect. On a deeper, almost spiritual level, boundaries align with universal principles of energy and consequence. Energy flows where it is respected and returns to those who honor it. By setting firm limits, you are not punishing anyone, you are creating alignment with natural law. Those who respect your boundaries are drawn closer, engaging authentically and valuing the relationship. Those who cannot honor your limits reveal their priorities and compatibility, allowing you to invest your energy more wisely. Ultimately, boundaries amplify respect because they communicate one undeniable truth. You are a sovereign being, your energy is precious, and your presence is not negotiable. When applied consistently and lovingly, boundaries transform relationships, illuminate values, and foster engagement from a place of admiration rather than entitlement. They are not walls. They are beacons, guiding others toward understanding, respect, and the recognition of what is truly priceless, the gift of your authentic presence. Silence is one of the most powerful, underestimated forces in human connection. In a world driven by constant communication, immediate responses, and relentless availability, silence feels uncomfortable, even threatening. Yet, when used intentionally, silence becomes a profound tool of clarity, awareness, and transformation. It is not about withdrawing in anger or playing games. It is about creating a space where truth can surface, where reflection can occur, and where both parties are confronted with the reality of their choices and actions. In relationships with avoidance, silence holds extraordinary power because it allows the avoidant to face what they often avoid, the consequences of their emotional distancing. Avoidants are wired to protect themselves from emotional intensity. They pull away when intimacy feels overwhelming or when vulnerability threatens to expose them. In this retreat, they often lose touch with the impact of their absence on others and with the depth of what they are missing. When you stop responding, when you allow silence to exist, you provide a mirror that cannot be ignored. It is in this quiet space that they begin to feel in a way they could not while you were always available. the subtle but undeniable consequences of their behavior. The empty space is a teacher, a spotlight, and a catalyst all at once. Silence creates the rare opportunity for introspection. In constant interaction, people rarely pause to consider their actions, their patterns, or the value of what they are being given. When you remove yourself from the equation, the avoidant is forced to reflect, how did I treat this person? How did I take their presence for granted? What does it mean that they are no longer accessible? These questions arise naturally, not because of confrontation, but because absence creates the mental and emotional room for awareness. Reflection is born in space, not in force, and silence provides exactly the kind of fertile ground that thought and feeling need to grow into clarity. For the person who chooses silence, this principle is equally empowering. Silence is not passive, it is an active declaration of self-respect, intentionality, and emotional sovereignty. By stepping back, you are reclaiming your energy, demonstrating that your time, attention, and emotional investment are not commodities to be taken for granted. This act communicates, without words, that your presence has value, that your engagement is intentional, and that you will not compromise your worth to maintain connection with someone who is not fully aligned. In this way, silence becomes a form of communication more powerful than any argument or explanation. Silence also introduces tension, and tension is a catalyst for desire, understanding, and transformation. Avoidants often resist closeness, but when they encounter the quiet absence of the person they have undervalued, they begin to feel the gap, the void, and the significance of what they lost. It is in that tension that they confront both longing and responsibility, emotions they may have avoided for years. This confrontation is not punitive, it is an awakening. It is a chance for them to see themselves, their choices, and the consequences of emotional avoidance with clarity that is impossible during constant engagement. On a deeper level, silence aligns with universal principles of energy, respect, and consequence. It honors the sacredness of your own emotional space while creating the conditions for natural reflection and insight in others. It transforms absence into a tool of growth, turning what might feel like withdrawal into a sacred invitation for self-awareness. It allows patterns to emerge, priorities to clarify, and value to be recognized organically. Ultimately, silence creates space for reflection because it is the absence that reveals presence. It illuminates patterns, behaviors, and choices that were previously unnoticed. It teaches without lecturing, awakens without force, and commands awareness without manipulation. In the quiet, both parties are given the opportunity to recognize value, confront avoidance, and step into a higher level of self-awareness. And in that reflection, transformation begins, not through words, but through the powerful, undeniable truth of absence. Self-empowerment is the ultimate catalyst for transformation, both in relationships and in life. It is the conscious decision to claim ownership over your energy, your choices, and your emotional state. It is the realization that your worth does not depend on the recognition, validation, or approval of others, and that your life is a reflection of your intentional actions rather than the whims of external circumstances. When you step into self-empowerment, you stop giving away your power through chasing, pleasing, or bending to accommodate avoidance. Instead, you create a magnetic presence rooted in clarity, confidence, and integrity, which transforms not only your own life, but the dynamics of every relationship you engage in. In relationships with avoidance, self-empowerment is particularly transformative because it breaks patterns of unbalanced energy exchange. Avoidants thrive in situations where emotional distance is maintained, and they often test the boundaries of those who are consistently available. When you step into your power, when you choose yourself over the fear of loss or the desire to be needed, you disrupt this dynamic. You are no longer reacting to their avoidance. You are proactively designing your emotional landscape. This shift is both liberating and magnetic. The avoidant begins to feel the absence of the person they once took for granted, and in that absence, they are forced to confront their own behaviors, choices, and priorities. Self-empowerment begins with clarity about what you will and will not accept. It is a conscious alignment with your values, your worth, and your purpose. You recognize that your energy is finite, your time is valuable, and your emotional labor is sacred. When you operate from this space, you no longer negotiate your presence for validation or attention. You no longer compromise your integrity to maintain connection. Instead, you create a life and a presence that is non-negotiable in its authenticity. This is profoundly transformative because it establishes a new standard for how you are treated, and it communicates without argument that your respect, love, and energy are not dispensable. The power of self-empowerment also lies in its ripple effect. When you honor yourself, you inspire those around you to recognize and respect your value. Avoidants, who may have previously evaded emotional responsibility, suddenly encounter a presence that cannot be ignored. Your empowerment forces them to see the consequences of their avoidance, the depth of your worth, and the authenticity of your life. This is not about coercion. It is about illumination. Transformation occurs not because you demand it, but because your empowered presence naturally commands awareness, reflection, and respect. At a deeper, almost spiritual level, self-empowerment is about alignment with universal principles. Life responds to those who claim their power, honor their energy, and act intentionally. When you choose yourself, you are co-creating with the universe in a way that honors truth, integrity, and authenticity. You become a living example of what is possible. When someone refuses to compromise their essence for the comfort, avoidance, or approval of others, your life becomes a beacon, a standard, and a call to awareness for those around you. Self-empowerment also creates resilience. By centering yourself and taking responsibility for your emotional state, you are no longer dependent on external validation or constant engagement. You are free to respond consciously rather than react unconsciously. You are free to invest in relationships that are reciprocal, authentic, and aligned with your values. And in that freedom, transformation is inevitable, not just for the people you encounter, but for your own life, your own growth, and your own sense of purpose. Ultimately, self-empowerment leads to transformation because it is the foundation from which all change springs. When you honor yourself, define your boundaries, and reclaim your energy, you create a life of clarity, integrity, and magnetism. Avoidance, and indeed anyone who encounters your empowered presence, are forced to reckon with the reality of your worth, the value of your energy, and the transformative impact of a life lived fully aligned with purpose. Empowerment is not just a choice. It is a declaration, a principle, and the spark that ignites profound, lasting transformation in yourself and in every connection you touch. Thank you for your time and trust. Wishing you clarity, strength, and endless growth on your journey. Goodbye, and may every step you take lead you closer to your highest purpose and true fulfillment.